what that looks like is a home for women that have been sex trafficked, sexually exploited. It's a long-term residential, holistic, trauma-informed home that we don't have yet, but we're working hard to get that house open. In the meantime, we understand that it's so important to educate the community on what human trafficking is, what it looks like, and how to prevent it, how to respond. And so I hope that you get all of that out of this training that I'm going to do for you today. And if you have any questions, please write them down, put them in the chat. I'm more than happy to help. I definitely think it's important that we all know what role that we can play in ending human trafficking. So what is human trafficking? Whatever myth, whatever you think that you know about human trafficking, many people really don't believe what is really true. So that's what we're here to do, is talk about what it really is. So the definition, as you can see on this slide, is the legal definition for the United States. And it is, I'm just going to break it down really simple for you. It's any kind of act from a person that uses force, fraud, or coercion to obtain some sort of labor or commercial sex act. It's basically what it is. And you can go to different websites and you'll see different things, it's stated a different way, but the crux of the crime is that it's force, fraud, or coercion, and we're going to break those things down as well. Force is what you would think it would be, but it can also be forced drug addiction. It can be, you can force people to do what you want them to do by manipulating their vulnerabilities. If they don't get food, they're going to manipulate that to give them food to do, get them to do what they want. So force can be beating, it can be forced drug addiction, it can be rape, it can be starvation. And so if you have a child that comes into your class or that comes to you and looks like they're not eating, it might not just be a simple case of neglect, which is not simple at all, but there could be more to it than that. And so it's worth digging into. Also fraud. Fraud is just being lied to, being tricked, promising something that they're not really going to give you. A lot of times you'll have people that will try to promise love or relationships. You have these kids that Kentucky's #1 for childhood abuse and neglect and opioid abuse. And so we have to think about those kids that are being neglected and abused. And so they're desperate for love. They're desperate for relationships and to be wanted. And so when you have somebody, a predator, that is willing to give them that love, and that's part of the grooming process, they break down that trust barrier and they promise them that they're going to give them love. They promise them what their parents can't give them. And so those are things that you want to look for as far as fraud goes. And it's also promised education or promised relationship, promised just life, a better life. I can give you what you need. I can give you an iPhone. I'll take care of you. And so before you know it, they're demanding that person pay for what they had given them, which means that, look, I've given you all this stuff. It's been a month. You need to pay up, figure out a way. And then they come up with a way for them to help them. And that looks like trafficking. And then the last crux to the crime is coercion. And coercion is basically threats to that person, to their family, to their loved ones. This is something that we don't see, and this is what really complicates finding trafficking victims, because they will not turn their traffickers in because they have been threatened, and they believe them. Threatened of being beaten, threatened of just being mistreated, psychological manipulation, all those things, social isolation, just getting their victim away from the people that they trust and love, their support system. And when they do that, they can psychologically manipulate them with the threats that they are using to keep them in the situation they're in. So that's just the basic overall picture of what human trafficking is, but let's break it down into two types. You have labor trafficking and sex trafficking. With labor trafficking, there's three major pieces to that, which is forced labor, debt bondage, and domestic servitude. You may not see this with the kids, but you may see this with the parents. So if you think about, you have a child that's maybe troubled and comes to you for whatever reason, and you get to talk to the parents or the mom or the dad, and you're just kind of be observant on what kind of job they have, and if are they living where they're working, different things like that can be really big red flags to maybe investigate, maybe dig in a little deeper into that situation. And just the same thing, it's preying on people's vulnerabilities. They have a need to work, but maybe they didn't get a high school education, so they can't get a normal job. So you have people that are willing to give them a job to pay them less, and maybe they don't know the rules and the laws of the land, so they can take advantage of that. And so that's how people fall prey to labor trafficking. Sex trafficking is the most prominent type of trafficking. It is just the greatest in America. America is the highest for purchasing sex, and we also are the biggest for producing porn. So to think it doesn't happen here is just not right. So sex trafficking is just 1 to 2% of victims that are trafficked in the sex industry are ever rescued. 12 to 14 years old is the average age a person enters into sex trafficking. When you think about the statistics, Kentucky has we're number one for child abuse and neglect and opioids. It's a perfect storm for trafficking victims to be fallen into that prey, into that life. The average lifespan, as you can see on the slide, is 7 years, and that looks like either they're abused so bad that they die, or they commit suicide, or they're just dropped off on the street and no one knows where they are. So it's the cycle of this abuse continues over and over again, because these victims deal with this trauma most of the time from childhood. And so when they fall prey to a trafficker, and the trafficker gets rid of her or whatever, she just falls back into that abuse again with another trafficker who's willing and ready to pick her up. So I wanted to differentiate between human trafficking and human smuggling. A lot of people get these confused. They do kind of overlap, but they are not the same thing. Human smuggling is a situation where you have a person that is giving permission for another person to move them from one country to another. So it is ultimately a crime against the country, a crime against that border. But if you're in that position where you're so desperate you want to get to another country, chances are you're really, really vulnerable. So human trafficking is right around the corner, and so those people are very, very vulnerable to being trafficked themselves. Human trafficking, on the other hand, where there is no permission, and even though there may be permission, there still has to be force, fraud, or coercion, unless that person is under 18 years old. If the victim is under 18 years old, it is not, you don't have to prove that it's force, fraud, or coercion. So think about the students that you work with, and any kind of situation where you think they may be in a trafficking situation. It's definitely worth investigating, because you don't have to prove that it's force, fraud, or coercion. If they're being sold for sex, or for any item, it can be anything worth of value to that person. It can be food, it can be drugs, it can be money, it can be any of those things. So think outside that box. Human trafficking in the United States is a $32 billion industry, and overall it's $150 billion industry. So it's a money crime. It's the second largest growing in criminal enterprise in the world, and it's the fastest growing enterprise in the world. So these are some examples of what some labor and sex trafficking looks like. Door-to-door sales, begging, panhandling. These people are very, very vulnerable. You have food service industry, you have janitorial industry, you have escorts, any kind of hotel work. All of these things can be a potential situation where they can be trafficked. So once you understand what human trafficking looks like and the potentials and the red flags, you will never look at another person the same way again. Trust me, it happens to me all the time. And so let's talk about how it works. You have a product, you have a buyer, and you have a seller. And so you have the demand, which is the people that want to buy sex. You have the traffickers, and you have the product, which is the people, the victims. And so with normal products, a pencil, a pen, a desk, you sell that item and you have to replenish that. That's your stock. You have to get more pencils to supply the demand. Well, with a human, you don't have to do that. You can sell that human over and over and over again. And that's just how it works, and it's just making millions and millions and billions of dollars for these traffickers. So what do traffickers look like? I picture, thinking about a prostitute and a pimp, which is what we used to call them, prostitutes and pimps. Now we call them victims and traffickers or predators. But what do you think about when you think about a prostitute? I see the movie Pretty Woman and Julia Roberts, just gorgeous, long legs, great hair, sweet as can be, just trying to make a living. And that is probably the exception to the rule. There are people out there that are sex workers, and they are really generally just trying to make a living, and that's what they're doing. But that does put them in a vulnerable situation, and chances are if they're not being pimped out, if they're not being trafficked, then soon they will be, because it is a dangerous world to live in. And then when you think about a trafficker, what do traffickers look like? I think about the pimps dressed up for Halloween with the fancy fur coats and the big chains and the wild hats. That is not at all what traffickers look like. So in the next few slides, I'm going to talk about and show you pictures of what real traffickers look like. They look like everyday people, normal moms, dads, uncles, aunts, brothers, cousins, sisters, everybody, girls, boys. It doesn't matter how much money you have. It doesn't matter what you look like. It doesn't matter if you have a family or not. Traffickers are everybody. So you have to get that myth out of your mind that it looks like, somebody walking on the street corner with chains and gold teeth. So this guy right here, Matthew Lyons, there was a complaint that a minor had posted on social media and about engaging in sexual activity with an adult in exchange for money. And so this was Elizabethtown, Kentucky. This guy was 33 for sex. He was arrested for sex, trafficking a child. He had attempted production of child pornography and attempted online enticement, distribution, and possession of child pornography. So this guy, he was communicating with these teenage boys on Grindr, and he paid them to send pictures and videos, and then he also paid them to perform for him, maybe on him, I'm not sure. But this is what trafficking looks like. These guys were 14 years old, and he paid them $60, $70. Lyons had more than 1,500 images and video files. This guy looks like a normal person. This couple right here, Gertrude and Harry, their boyfriend and girlfriend, and Gertrude has a 4-year-old boy, and he was with mom at her house. And the guy, Harry, was at a gas station in Corbin, Kentucky, and he was trying to sell the child for $2,500 for drugs. Obviously, drugs are a big part of the state, and drugs and trafficking go hand in hand, and anyone vulnerable is fair game to these people. even your own child. So people do it all the time, and all you got to do is a simple Google search for trafficking in human trafficking in Kentucky, and you'll find all kinds of arrests being made. We also have Clarietta Allen, who was arrested for trafficking. She had two women that she moved from Kentucky to Georgia and was trafficking them, selling them in prostitution. She was sentenced to 15 years. But here we have a woman that's, she looks fairly young, fairly good looking, normal, and then you have Epstein, Jeffrey Epstein. If you haven't heard of his case, it's worth looking into. Jeffrey was a very, very wealthy man. He rubbed elbows with presidents and kings and princes, and he had this basically a prostitution ring, and he had other people doing his dirty work, and other women, other girls. He would entice them to come to give him a back rub for $200, and after he broke down their trust, he would ask them to do more, like take off their shirt, and then he'd ask them to do other things. And so if they didn't want to do it, he would ask them to go get other girls to do it, and he would still give them $200. So he just kept this up and had people doing his dirty work for him. Of course, he had pockets full of money, and he had an island, and he had yachts, and he just had so much money, and this was his entertainment, I guess. So it doesn't matter who you are, what you look like, how much money you have. Everyone can be a trafficker, and anyone can be a victim. The next slide shows this generational abuse that happened. This guy, Larry Porter, he's 69 here. He would supply drugs for parents, moms, dads, whoever, and so he could molest their children and abuse them. So these three women that you see, there's four women there, but the first three on the left, they would come and bring their kids and do drugs, smoke joints, whatever, so that old Larry could have his way with them in the back bedroom. And then the other lady, same thing, Charity, she was 41. She would bring her child to Larry for pills. And so it goes on. And so after, researching this a case, I found that it was pretty much generational. His dad, his uncle, his son, and I think he had a brother that was also involved in this big sting situation. This next slide shows a bunch of guys that had been arrested for a reverse derby sting. So they set up an ad in the paper or online, and it was to have sex with a minor. And so all of these people answered that ad, and so they were arrested. And this was right around Derby. I think two of those guys are jockeys. This is a picture of what human trafficking looks like, sex trafficking looks like. This woman right here, I'm 99% sure she's a victim of sex trafficking. I was on my way to go speak to someone. I had a meeting in Versailles, and this lady was walking down the street, and as I passed her, I was like, she looks a little odd. And then as I'm passing her, I'm like, was she barefoot? And so the lady has no shoes on. I think she's got shorts on or a skirt, but she's got this oversized jacket on. She's obviously dirty. She's been walking. It's been raining. It rained earlier that day, so her feet are dirty as can be. So I actually stopped to try to talk to her, and she wouldn't have anything to do with me. A lot of times that's what you'll get, but it's just a matter of recognizing it and calling the police and saying, hey, I think there's a trafficking victim, and just to try to get them the help that they need. So there was a police officer waiting at that next intersection, and so I ended up leaving, but as I was walking away, I snapped this picture so that I could share it with this training. So it's an economic crime. right? There's so much money involved. So let's do the math. You have one girl and she does $20 a trick, and she has to bring home a certain amount of money, right? So she does 20 tricks a day. That's $400, and she doesn't get a day off. So she works 7 days a week. That brings $2,800 a week, but that's $145,000 a year. Do you think that she is getting that money? Absolutely not. She takes it to her trafficker, who supplies her drugs, who might give her a place to sleep. He might, let her get food. He might not. But she's probably addicted to drugs and has no way out. But most traffickers don't have just one girl. He usually has more. So let's just say he has 6 girls, and each of those girls bring home that amount of money. So he has almost $1 million a year in his pocket, not doing a thing, maybe buying drugs for the girls, whatever. And then if you have another girl that maybe she's a higher end escort and she's, $100 a trick, she does 8 tricks a day and she gets a day off. And that's $4,800 a week. That's $250,000 a year. And if he has 4 girls, that's still $1 million a year. So let's talk about how they found their victims. We talked about vulnerability, and so that's what it's truly all about. So I'll go through this slide really quickly. Warm gifts, promising gifts, promising a better life, promising marriage, promising a job. Most of those things are lies, and they'll get to that job and to find out that they have to pay for the supplies that they use. That's debt bondage, where they keep accumulating debt as they're working, so they'll never pay it off. Plus, you have other situations where someone is, you move to another state and they're like, hey, I'll get you here, just come, we'll pay you this much, blah, blah, blah. They go and come to find out there's no heat or air in the house that they're staying in. There's no food. And to get food and to get the heat on, they have to pay for it all. And so there's just all this fine print that they're not sharing with these victims. And so they get there, they don't have any documentation, because most of the time, many times, they will take their documentation to hold on to it and say, hey, I got to make copies of this, and they never give it back. Just different things like that. And so they just fall prey just for being vulnerable and not knowing the rules and the laws. So who are being trafficked? People being trafficked are vulnerable people. But in the United States, from what I've seen, it starts out an endless cycle of abuse. It starts out as children. Their parents were abused. So it's just an awful, awful cycle that just keeps continuing. And the average age a person enters into sex trafficking, like we said before, is 12 to 14 years old. So that means that these kids, they're being groomed from the internet and from, childhood, people that they know. This isn't just poor people. This isn't just singles. This isn't just girls. This is boys as well. And more and more men are coming forward saying, I was abused, this happened to me. And so we cannot wean out the boys, because they are just as vulnerable as the girls. And for the boys, a lot of times they're being groomed from game systems, internet games, Minecraft, TikTok. I mean, girls too, but when the boys play those, gosh, I can't even name them, but there's a whole bunch of games that the boys play online, and they're playing with other people online, and so they don't know who they are. And so these parents who, are neglecting their kids are not paying attention to what they're doing online. And so they're befriending these people, these strangers, and they are just building down that wall of trust so that they can groom them. They're grooming them to just trust them. So before you know it, they're like, hey, let's meet. I know this great arcade, or I know this great mall, or whatever. And so before you know it, they're leaving, and basically you'll never see the kid again. But a lot of what it looks like in Louisville, in Kentucky in particular, is runaways. You have runaways, you have people that are just, in poverty, that don't have, maybe single parents that aren't able to, watch out for their kids all the time because they're working. It's just a bad situation. So when we say sexually abused, physically abused, and neglected kids, that is probably the highest risk factor. Poverty adds to it, and then by the time they're teenagers, all teenagers think they know everything, so they're ready to get out, and if they're even slightly abused at home, then they're ready to go out on their own, and so that puts them in an extremely vulnerable situation. In the United States, there are about 700,000 registered sex offenders, but in Kentucky, that number is about 8,400. That actually went down 1,000, almost 1,000, due to COVID, because there wasn't reporting, the court system wasn't up and running. So a lot of the stats you'll see, we just need to pretty much omit 2020 because it's not going to be accurate. So there's about 9,000 in the state of Kentucky. So when we talk about the vulnerables, here are some statistics that I would like to share with you. 1 in 7 teenagers run away from home. 34% of all children missing from care had multiple missing incidences in Kentucky. And that was a statistic in 2019. Now, when you go to NCMEC, which is National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, you will find that the statistic on missing children, that is multiple times one person runs away. So if someone runs away 3 times, that number is added to the full amount of missing children. So if it says 1,000 children ran away, several of those are going to be multiple runaways at the same time. And about 1 in 10 young adults ages 18 to 25 and about 1 in 30 adolescents ages 13 to 17 experience some form of unaccompanied homelessness. That means no parent, no adult supervision. They're alone on their own. It kills me that that statistic is so accurate. It's crazy. So the grooming process is how traffickers, how predators groom their victims. They pretend to be friends. They just buddy up with them. They like the same things they like, and they just become friends with them. And they use all of the internet social media accounts that you can think of. I've added 3 or 4 of these since I started doing this training, and I've only been doing it for 2 years. So TikTok, Plenty of Fish, Fortnite, OnlyFans, that's the new one. Any site where there's any kind of interaction is with other people that you don't know that there's a potential. Facebook, of course, is another one. It's just, we have to pay attention to what our kids are doing. This is what the law says about human trafficking. The law states that a person guilty of human trafficking, when that person intentionally is engaged in forced labor or services, commercial sexual activity through force, fraud, or coercion, or if the person is under the age of 18. And it's a Class C felony unless they move the person out of state or unless the person is under 18, and then that's a Class B felony. So I also wanted to share that there is a Kentucky statewide human trafficking task force. The U.S. Attorney's Office, the FBI, Kentucky State Police, Kentucky Office of the Attorney General, and the Lexington Police Department are on it, but there are also a whole slew of other service providers, NGOs, nonprofits, medical, law enforcement, just a whole bunch of other people that are on that task force. I'm actually the chair of the Prevention and Awareness Working Group, and so we're trying to work together with other agencies in our state to make a difference. Kentucky's rankings, like I've said before, we are number 1 in the nation for child abuse and neglect, and it's been that way since 2013. We're number 1 for opioid abuse. Last year in 2019, we were Kentucky's 9th for new criminal human trafficking cases, and we ranked 25th in the United States for number of active human trafficking cases. For being such a small state, that's a pretty high number. So what can we do about it? SOAR is stop, observe, ask, and respond. Stop to understand the scope of human trafficking. You're doing that right now. You're learning what human trafficking is, what it looks like, and observe. Recognize that, we have to understand the verbal and nonverbal indicators of human trafficking, and then ask the question, to interact or not interact. Most of the time, it's not safe to interact. Most victims don't identify as victims. And if you say, hey, you need help, they're going to probably punch you or tell you, get out of their face. But many times victims don't understand that they're victims because this abuse has been going on since childhood and this is normal for them. So we have to understand how to ask, how to approach, and what to do. So responding effectively and safely is the next step. And so we're going to go through all these things right now. So stop ignoring the problem, learn the truth about the issue, don't overlook your own circles, and awareness and prevention are key. Being aware, you're learning right now what human trafficking looks like, sex trafficking, labor trafficking, and what the signs are, what makes people vulnerable in different situations, your red flags, your little, your red flags that go up, and you'll understand there's more questions that need to be asked here. And if you have a relationship with that person, you can ask those people about what their life is like and what kind of job they have and when's the last time they ate, those kind of things. We want to observe. We want to observe the whole situation, not just one piece of it. So these red flags are great for identifying situations that could potentially be a trafficking situation. Do they appear scared or nervous? But they can also appear agitated and angry. In school setting, are they wearing appropriate clothing for the weather? Do they wear the same clothing every day? I mean, I understand that you all have so much on your plates, but to help a student that is potentially being trafficked, and we have to look out for them. So just looking beyond the surface and paying attention to what is happening. This is some branding that you may or may not see if you deal with teenagers. This is what many prostitutes that are victims of trafficking will have some branding. It'll be someone's name. It'll be a crown. Many times it'll just have like the name of the gang that they're in. Whoever their trafficker is, a lot of times they'll have that on them and it would be somewhere where everyone can see, but they'll also be in areas where they can't be seen. So if you're in a position to ask questions with a potential trafficking victim, you want to be able to build a relationship. You can't just be intrusive. You can't just go at it real aggressively. You want to be able to build trust with them so that they can be honest. And remember also that it may seem like lies. It may seem the time frame may be off if they do disclose to you. So don't put too much stock into it being completely accurate. But that comes with trauma, and we just have to keep asking questions to get to the truth in the heart of it. But also note what you say, be careful with what you say, be very intentional, and also, ask questions when it's appropriate. If it's not appropriate, just, hold your tongue. But also know that communication is possible, but it's not always the safest way to do that. So even if you have an opportunity to talk to someone, you have to be very intentional when you're talking to them. So you want to ask questions. You want to keep pursuing that relationship with them so you can find out what's really happening. And then responding. How do we respond in an appropriate and safe manner? This person that you're talking to may be, if they find out, if their trafficker or their parent or whoever it is finds out that they've led on or they've given someone the impression that there's something going on at home, it could cause more abuse for them at home. So you have to be very, very careful. How do you respond and when you respond? You never want to patronize the person. You always want to be able to just give them power to make choices. They never, they don't get the chance to really have control of things going on in their life. So when you take control over them in the situation, it may make them feel like they don't have any control. So let them have control of the situation. Say things like, it's up to you. Do you want you want me to help you with this situation? Do you want me to help you get out of it? It's not, when you get to that point in the conversation where you can help them get out of this situation, you really want them to have control. But don't assume, ask questions first. They're always going to think it's a boyfriend. They're always going to think that they love them. But don't say they're a trafficker. They're trafficking you. They're predators. You can't just come at them like that. So it's just very important to be intentional with your words. Understand that getting out's not easy, but also you can call 911. If it has to do with a minor, it's our duty. If we think there's abuse involved, we have to call, that. But also you can call the trafficking hotline number. It is very important to be able to call the hotline number as well. And it's not like a 911 call. It is more about getting information and sharing what you know. If there's a situation where you think is a trafficking situation and you know enough that you're like, hey, I'm pretty sure this is happening, you can call the hotline number and they will answer questions. What happens with the hotline number is they will report. They will make a report of what you see and what you find, and then they will eventually call the police, the local police, and they will get that information as well. But the hotline number is, it's grown every year, and they are just a little bit understaffed. So I'm not sure how much time goes by before they can let the local police know what's happening. So I would suggest that you call the local police as well and just say, hey, I called the hotline number to report it, but I want you guys to know that this person is in danger, that I'm pretty sure this is happening. Let them investigate. But understand that we have to be very intentional with how we respond. So the next step is to have the hotline number in your phone. If you don't have this number in your phone, please put it in your phone. You can also text 233-733, and that is Be Free. But it's a great way to get information, ask questions. It's a safe place. It's not, like I said, it's not like a 911 call. It's just people on the other line that know what human trafficking is, and they can answer questions for you and help you to respond in a healthy way. These other resources that I've put on here are great for people that want to know more about human trafficking, what it looks like right here in the United States, some statistics. They're all right here. These are great. For people that work with kids, parents, operationparent.org, absolutely amazing. Kidsmarts.org is absolutely amazing. They have specialized videos, age appropriate, on bullying, on drug abuse, on alcohol, on just any kind of abuse. It's so great. I love it. I'm so glad that I stumbled upon it years ago. But the Trafficking Institute, that also has some great statistics, missingkids.org. That's the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children's website. Enough.org, Polaris Project, and humantraffickinghotline.org. The hotline will give you some great statistics on each state individually, but you have to understand that those stats are for the hotline only. So anyone that called in, those go into those stats. So those might not be completely accurate, but it's a great way to get a feel of the landscape for your state. The podcast, Ending Human Trafficking, has been amazing for me. I've learned so much from it. They have every episode is about different facets of human trafficking, from law enforcement's point of view, prosecution's point of view, victims' point of view, victim advocates, victim service